Mini episode 1448 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode 1448. This is FDH managing partner Rick Morris, and we have a tremendous honor as far as what we're going to be doing today to break down Super Bowl 56 and to reflect back on this. We have an excellent guest, someone who has covered multiple Super Bowls and someone who is in many ways a pioneer in the world of sports journalism. I just noted to her off air, one of the most relevant things for this conversation is being named one of GQ's 5 ideal dinner guests, and that's the vibe I'm sure you'll be getting from this conversation here. This is somebody who is legendary in so many ways, and on her bio, first woman to do any number of things here. Again, whether it be winning the Emmy Sports Lifetime Achievement Award, Pro Football Hall of Fame, handle a Super Bowl trophy presentation on air, winning the Billie Jean King Outstanding Journalist Award, first to cover the NBA Finals or the World Series or the Super Bowl, first one on a Super Bowl sideline, to carry the Olympic torch, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, Rick, they get the idea.
They get the idea. Well, hey, man, I try to put over our guests strong. They always appreciate that. So,
I know,
that's...
but it's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing. I mean, it wouldn't have happened without tremendous... I was always hired by men, of course, because I was always the first woman, but I had tremendous men who gave me those opportunities. And, the GQ, the ideal dinner guest was really something totally unexpected, and a couple of the others were Doris Kearns Goodwin, the great historian, and another one was Maureen Dowd, the Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like, you really had to be up for it.
Well, I can tell you, Lesley Visser, if the list of accomplishments is a bit much, take it up with your webmaster, because that's where I'm getting all of this. But you really built an outstanding record, being able to go through first in print journalism with the Boston Globe and then to CBS. It's an interesting thing, by the way. I was thinking about this before you came on, and I was jotting down a couple of names here over a period of time. We've worked our way through a lot of one-time CBS employees in a lot of different ways, whether it be the late, great Peter Scolari from Newhart, of course, or Ian Eagle, Charlie Casserly on the football side. On the news side, Charles Osgood, Rebecca Jarvis, Russ Mitchell, Armin Katayan. But one of the ones that really came to mind, at the risk of embarrassing you further, was Bob Barker, because for everything that he did writ large in the game show industry, I feel like that's what you have been able to do in the course of your career and in the course of really helping to create the whole role of the sideline reporter. It really, you were there sort of at the genesis of that, and you've covered any number of things, again, as we were talking about, presiding over trophy ceremonies and things like that. And these were things that, as you say, the opportunities you were given, but if you weren't making the most of them, they would have dried up.
Well, thank you for that. I have to say, all those CBS greats I got to work with. I started at the Boston Globe. They made me the first woman to cover the NFL as a beat, and that's when papers were king. And the Boston Globe, we always got voted the number one, not because of me, but the number one sports section in America. So we had Bud Collins on tennis. I would go to Wimbledon with him. Peter Gammons on baseball.
Yes.
I did the World Series with him. The NBA Finals with Bob Ryan. So when I got to CBS, I really felt comfortable with all the sports. I just didn't know the technology of TV, but I worked with all of those. My first Final Four, I think I've covered 35 of them, but the first one was Brent Musburger and Billy Packer, and by the last ones I did, it was Jim Nantz and Clark Kellogg. And in between, I got to do the NCAA tournament with Bill Walton and Dick Enberg and Bill Raftery and Vern Lundquist, and of course many with Jim Nance. So I feel really privileged to have worked with all the people that I have.
Yes, you've worked with a roll call, a who's who there, and you mentioned about the Boston Globe, and I remember, and this is a thing back to, I guess, the 80s, when I remember trying to get my hands on the out-of-town copy of it, because I think it would be Sunday that you would have that very, very voluminous Peter Gammons column. And that would be worth driving halfway across town for to try to get your hands on. So, yeah, I mean, the Boston Globe, that because of all of you who are there on that masthead, that was really something that was revered all over the place in journalism.
Well, it never used to be that, and thank you for that. Yeah, Peter, the Boston Globe invented those Sunday Notes columns. So Peter did all the baseball. He'd go down to the Dominican Republic in the 70s to scout, the teenage riches. But, and Bob Ryan would do it on basketball, and the great Will McDonough would do it on football. So it was a time when print reporters did not go into TV, but the Globe was really the start of that. Bud Collins was the first in tennis, then Will McDonough and Will went to NBC, I went to CBS, and now, we see all kinds of print reporters on television. So the industry, it's really moved along. I always I have to do quite a bit of speaking, as you might imagine, and I always tell young people, particularly women, that there are 3 non-negotiables, I believe. I think you'll make it in this business if, 1, you have passion, because if you don't love it, don't do it. It'll come out. You'll be angry that you didn't make enough money or someone else got a different assignment. 2, you need knowledge. Knowledge brings confidence. So if you really know what you're looking at, turn the sound down in the beginning, call the game for yourself. And 3rd, you have to have stamina, because certainly, you've been around a long time, and that Ferris wheel goes up, but it also comes down.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of those things where I would think that some of the young people that you speak to over a period of time, they're probably pretty dumbfounded in terms of, your career with it, again, starting off in print and then moving into broadcast. If you'd had any aspirations to get in broadcast at that time, that's how it would have had to have gone. Because I'm not going to say there was 0 female sportscasters on earth, but there really wasn't that many of them. And that was something that sort of more got created, I guess, in the 80s and forward, versus today. You have a lot of women who are coming out of college. This is what they want to do. They're doing broadcast all along. They're preparing for it. And the notion that there was once a world where you couldn't just come out of college and expect to be doing sports broadcasting at a high level must be dumbfounding to some of them when they first kind of learn of that.
Well, it's been a real frontier. Even when I started at the Globe, because I was the first woman covering the NFL, the actual credentials that I wore said no women or children in the press box. They had no ladies' rooms. And then when I went to CBS, they'd had Phyllis George, who was fabulous and a wonderful, great friend of mine. But the people who ran CBS said, we had a woman who knew TV, but she didn't know sports. So this time we're going to hire someone who knows sports, and we'll teach you the TV. Mm-hmm. And it's enormously gratifying. I was just out in LA. I think that was about my 35th Super Bowl. And there are just women everywhere, podcasts, broadcasts, they're writers. So I'm really thrilled the way the business has opened up for women.
It really has progressed over a period of time. And again, the Super Bowl is something that you've really gotten to see from all angles. Whether it be covering the broadcast live or being an observer of it. And this is where, again, I know your thoughts on this are going to be very, very interesting. I know a big part of what goes into this as far as the work itself would be those production meetings ahead of time, meeting with the coaches and some of the key players and trying to get inside their heads a little bit. And that, to me, that's an aspect I was thinking about a lot this time around, with the whole teacher-pupil aspect of Sean McVay and Zach Taylor. And we were speculating on our preview show about whether or not there was going to be any type of overthinking involved. Well, they might think we're going to do this, so let's do this instead. And in my mind, that did manifest itself, because a team like the Bengals that relied very, very disproportionately on the ground with Joe Mixon, more so than most teams. I mean, he was third in the league in rushing, but they were 23rd in rushing as a team. So when they were rushing the ball, predominantly it was with him. So what do they do in a couple of key third and short situations? Go away from him. Oh, they won't see it coming. And famously, it didn't work, because most of the time when people don't see something coming, there's a good reason for it. It's because it wasn't a very good idea. So, I mean, I'm sure that's something that you probably saw over a period of time as well, that, coaches trying, outthinking themselves a little bit when they're matching up with somebody else, whether it's a mentor of theirs or whether it's somebody who knows them very well. That has to be something that's a very human temptation as far as trying to stay one step ahead of the other team.
Yeah, I think by now most coaches have coached against or with the people that they're seeing on the other side of the field. I remember, of course, we saw Belichick, was so close to Parcells, then it was opposite Parcells, and it was back with Parcells. Mm-hmm. So you see it all over the place. I think that Zach will get a lot better. I think a little bit of his youth or inexperience kind of showed on the 2 4th-and-1 plays, and also at the end of the game, that was just a little messy, but it was the Rams really have no weaknesses, and you could have made the case for Von Miller or Aaron Donald, I guess. Aaron Donald being the MVP, and usually they give it to the quarterback, and Matt Stafford had a solid game, but and Kupp was the greatest postseason receiver in history. Even his numbers are better over this postseason than Jerry Rice. So that team was really balanced, and who knew that after never having a team play at home, now we've had 2 of them in a row. So I think I thought it was the whole playoffs. I think, what was it? The last 7 games were all decided within 3 points at the end of regulation. So,
right.
It was just a bonanza for the NFL, and it's everything, of course, that they dream of on Park Avenue at the NFL headquarters.
Absolutely. No doubt about that. And when you look at this, this is a thing where, again, sometimes you find players or coaches that are very, very lucky to end up being on the winning side because of how they're remembered. And this is a thing where, and I'm going to reference an event that is not fondly remembered where I live on America's North Coast, and that would be the 2016 World Series, where I always felt like Joe Madden was very lucky that the Cubs won. Because if you look at it through the course of the World Series, Terry Francona, with a much lesser hand, really outmanaged him in a lot of key points. Nobody remembers that. People remember that. And Madden's a brilliant guy. He deserves to be remembered as a champion, and he's got that World Series title. But I felt like, boy, he's lucky that nobody's going to remember all the dribs and drabs during that added up over the course of the 7 games. I look at Sean McVay the same way. And I've been I was one of the early Sean McVay guys out there. Really thought that he was brilliant. I have one of these beliefs in bloodlines, and that's a thing where, knowing that his grandfather was a key executive with the 49ers, I'm a believer in things like that. But I look at this game, and all the times on first down and just pounding it into the line with futility. The great Bill Barnwell, who I follow on Twitter, kept saying, I can't believe they weren't using that to set up for play action even once. You look at it through the course of the game. They went to Cooper Kupp early and then not again until the final drive. This is one of these things where I think McVay is very fortunate to be on the winning side, because he would have gotten dissected 6 ways to Sunday, I think, had they come up short.
Well, I'm not sure you can know that, but you can know what you have in Cooper Kupp, and the Super Bowl was going to be in his hands. He was going, which just makes me, rather than to diminish McVay, it makes me exalt Kupp, because I think the Super Bowl was on his hands and he got it, and that's what just makes it so dramatic. He was the offensive player of the year. Now he won the Super Bowl. He led everybody in receptions. So you don't know where players are going to come from, and then how are they going to be in the moment. I was on the field for both those Vinatieri Super Bowl kicks, and now we see the young kid from Cincinnati, Money Mac. Mm-hmm. So you really don't know where someone is going to step up, and that's actually what I always love about sports. It's the great meritocracy. It doesn't matter where your mother went to college or how much money you have. If you hit the jumper or you sink the putt, that's you. And, some people are fortunate to have those bloodlines, which doesn't mean they're going to be great. It doesn't mean that Mark Davis is Al Davis, but it gives you the opportunity to be around it at a very young age. You see it a lot in broadcasting, of course. Joe Buck is excellent. All Ernie Johnson, father, grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't always happen that they're great just because they're related.
Oh, we know that in Cleveland because I was a big believer in Pat Shermer because of the bloodlines with Uncle Fritz, and it didn't work out so well when he was here. So, yes, as you point out, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And, yes, Cooper Kupp with one of the great seasons for any wide receiver ever. But in terms of, again, the fact that it was really sort of the donut hole of not getting the ball in the middle of the game, even after Beckham went down. They already didn't have their starting tight end going into the game. The fact that Robert Woods got hurt is what brought Beckham to LA in the first place. Was that the kind of thing that you would ever sort of pick up on in a production meeting of where coaches would talk about, well, we don't want to be too obvious in what we're doing? Because, again, the obvious thing would have been you go to Cooper Kupp until it doesn't work. And they weren't doing that until the final drive when they had the gun to their heads, and they went to him, and lo and behold, it worked. So as far as the tendency to want to avoid the obvious, was that the kind of thing that you would ever hear coaches talking about a lot before the games?
They don't express it that way. It's here's where we see we can have an advantage.
Okay.
Here's where, we have to double Odell, or how are we going? I mean, the rushing defense, was pretty good. I mean, people always forget the defense.
Sure.
But I think that's what they have to say. Who do we need to step up? Where do we think we have the edge? And, those edges, they're small. And you really have to give so much credit to Joe Burrow because he knew he was going to get sacked. Mostly this year he's been looking up at the sky. And yet, I don't know, did you see where he went and introduced himself?
Yes.
To both Von Moore. I thought that was great. So I just say, and comebacks in the Super Bowl, I don't know if you can get better than that. I mean, I guess the best thing in sports, right, is a Game 7. But comebacks in the Super Bowl are pretty impressive, too. So, and I remember I did the game where, Brady had taken over for Drew Bledsoe against the Rams. And John Madden said on the air, I just play for the tie and go for overtime. And Tom Brady wasn't going to do that. And those weren't household name receivers. He didn't have Randy Moss back then. But I'm just always impressed when somebody's skill or confidence meets the moment.
Yes, and that was very much a thing. And again, I'm a Joe Burrow guy just because, he plays for the Bengals, which is a rival of my hometown team. But I went to Ohio University, and I actually called games in Athens Stadium, high school football games, before it was Joe Burrow Stadium. So, the kid is basically an honorary Bobcat. All of us Bobcats are very fond of him, or most of us anyways. So
Wow, that's pretty cool. How about this? Here's a question for you.
Uh-huh.
There have been, because this relates to your hometown,
Okay.
I was just part of a documentary on this. Do you know there have been 50 million pitches thrown in Major League Baseball, and one killed a guy at the plate?
Yes.
You know that?
Yes,
Yeah.
Ray Chapman, and I think
Chapman.
I think I've seen his grave at Lakeview Cemetery. It's up there with some of the famous people. If I'm remembering correctly, at Lakeview Cemetery in town. And yes, that is 1920, I believe. Which
it was.
Weirdly
It
enough,
was. And you know what it was back then? That pitchers, remember, they could scuff the ball.
That's
or
right.
Spit tobacco on it, and so he was a righty, but it was like a sidewinder. Mays had a sidewinding pitch, and so it came around and hit him in the temple before he could really see it, and he went right down. And of course, he was a Yankee, and me, as a bred and bled Bostonian, Carl Mays was actually in that trade with Babe Ruth. So the heck with him.
Wow. Well, yeah, and that's where, and if I remember correctly, I believe that was the impetus for the end of the dead ball era, getting rid of the spitters and everything like that.
Yes.
That they were, because they deemed it to be too dangerous, and that's where the spitters and the doctoring had to go. And that's where, and we haven't had another fatality since. Oddly enough, one of the 2 years that Cleveland won the World Series, along with 1948. And a couple of painful near misses in my lifetime, but another story for another day. But yes, sports gives us a lot of drama.
I did the World Series with Al Michaels and Tim McCarver. The Cleveland Atlanta World Series,
right?
And it was so much fun. Hadn't the Jake just opened that year?
Yes.
You had Kenny Lofton. I mean, you had such an exciting team.
Yes, very much so. And I always felt like that team, there were a lot of comparisons people made, and I feel like it stacks up. The 95 Indians when you look at the offensive power of that team up and down the lineup, and like you said, Lofton too, so there's speed in there as well. A lot of people felt that it matched up. You go back 20, 25 years to the Big Red Machine, also in our state, of course. A lot of people felt that it matched up. Now, again, Cincinnati, they were able to bring home the trophy a couple of times, and the Indians of that period of time
You're telling
weren't.
a born, bred, and bled Bostonian
Yes.
about the 75 Cincinnati Reds. You might want to read that. We thought the series ended with Fisk's home run.
Well, Lesley, of course, I'm introducing that for all of these sports folks out there who may not know that. Of course, that's seared in your mind, and if it means anything to you, your Boston teams have seared a lot of things in the minds of my Cleveland teams over a period of time. Albeit, as I always point out, not the 2017 and 2018 NBA Eastern Conference Finals, but again, that's
yes. Oh my God, yes.
Of course, that's another story for another day as well. But it's funny, we're talking about Cincinnati here, and as opposed to the Big Red Machine, which was absolutely loaded, you look at this Bengals team here now, and again, by anybody's definition, this team was way ahead of schedule as far as being able to make it to the Super Bowl in year 2 of Burrow. And while you may not be somebody, you may not define yourself as a sports historian, but to me, I feel like you are because of the amount of time that you've covered these things, everything that you've seen firsthand. So you're a perfect person to ask about this, because I can't think of too many precedents here. Had Cincinnati actually won that game with as incomplete a team as they had, no offensive line, as we saw yet again, poor Joe getting tossed hither and there as he was in the Tennessee game. I feel like in the back seven, they definitely need a lot of depth as well, although, again, it was the coaching job of all time to shut down Kansas City in the second half of the AFC Championship game. But for a team with as many holes as they still have, to have won the Super Bowl, I can't think of a precedent for that, of a team being able to burst through that quickly.
Well, I don't know that people felt Trent Dilfer was, the greatest quarterback of all time. And in that case, of course, the defense was so brilliant.
Sure.
But it was, if they just really need some offensive linemen.
Yes.
I think the rest of the team is in pretty good shape. And, of course, Burrow, who just seems protected by his innocence or something. He doesn't know that,
right.
that he went so far so quickly. But also you see different people jumping up. The quarterback position has changed so much. When we all grew up, it was the drop back, and now it's Mahomes with the shuffle pass and people throwing off their toes and running like Lamar. So I think this is, in my time, the most exciting time I've seen in the NFL.
It definitely is an exciting period of time, and there's so many different angles of things that get covered. And I will bring this up somewhat hesitatingly and somewhat haltingly when I say that your friend Al Michaels was maybe taking a little bit of heat in my hometown here this week for the whole thing of like, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Thank God Odell got out of Cleveland and got onto a winner. There's that whole storyline there.
Well, he had two cities. I did everything with Al. I did Monday Night. I was the first woman on Monday Night Football, so I did Monday Night Football with Al. I did the World Series with Al. I did the Triple Crown with Al. So he's actually one of my closest friends. But Al doesn't mince anything. You know, he was really grateful when you got that beautiful Ritz-Carlton, because that suited Al. And he loved baseball. He loved doing the World Series there. But he's he's hard on cities. Remember, he had a go round with Minneapolis because the Super Bowl was there. I think he's one thing about him. He is no fraud. Al Michaels, he's the best ever, I think, play-by-play, and I was married to the great Dick Stockton, and I still can say that, Al really, in and out of every sport, is just at the highest level. But I like him because he says what he thinks.
Yes, he does. And this is a thing where, too, and again, my sense of him from afar is that, again, and this may have been his last broadcast with NBC. We'll see how that shakes out contract-wise, but obviously that's not anything that would have affected his performance one way or another, and that's a thing where, again, as far as the direction of the broadcast, he's going to go along with that. He's going to be a team player, would certainly be my sense and most people's sense of this. It seems like over a period of time, and feel free to disabuse me of this notion, but of where on the production side and the network side, the whole thing of like storylines and stuff. At the risk of being the crusty old guy, I don't really remember Summerall and Madden really talking storylines or, off-field intrigue or things like that. And that's where the Beckham thing, to me, it just seems more a function of sort of this modern age of like, hey, let's put something out there for the non-fans who are watching our broadcast today. So am I wrong that that's become something that's been more a period of time sort of pushed by networks and production as far as trying to hook in more non-football fans and get into storylines?
No, that's not really new at all. It was just that John and Pat, and that's when I started at CBS, just had a completely different philosophy. I mean, always the up close and personal, that's
Sure.
what ABC made their name on.
Of course.
And they would very much on Monday Night Football have all kinds of different stories to pull into it. And John was somebody who didn't like, just showing the way ABC approached the game, showed fewer people on the field, and John was the one who said, no, I want to see all 22. And when he built his Madden game, that was something he insisted on. So John but John brought a million things. I wrote his best with him. I did quite a few of those Madden Summerall games. And John, he would circle Nate Newton if there were a piece of paper on the Cowboy field. He'd circle it and say that was a Snickers bar that fell out of Nate Newton's uniform. So
right.
he was a story guy too. So
sure.
yeah, I'm not sure I'd agree with that.
Okay. Could be recency bias on my part. We all tend to remember, the old days a little bit differently here, and perhaps that's what I'm doing. And I want to get back to John Madden in a second here, but on the specifics of one of the Super Bowls that you mentioned previously covering, the last time the Rams won the Super Bowl, I believe I read something somewhere where you rated that as your favorite game that you had covered. The 23-16 win, Tennessee comes up a yard short. Was I reading that correctly? Had you listed that as your favorite Super Bowl that you'd covered?
Yes, my favorite Super Bowl, but it had a lot of factors going into it. It was our Monday Night Crew. It was on ABC, and I was on the Rams sideline very close to where Jones stopped Dyson, and it was just to me just the confluence of all the factors that they were the greatest show on turf, offense. And then it was like a little-known linebacker who stopped Kevin Dyson. And I always used to tease Kevin, he used to say, God, if I were just a little bit taller, if my arm were just a little bit longer. And that I just thought, because I was there on that sideline rather than being in a press box or somewhere else. The Vinatieri kicks were really exciting too, but I just felt I was happy for Dick Vermeil. It was great for Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, those great receivers. Plus, in the end, it was a defensive play. So I just really enjoyed that one personally. I've had others. I've had Final Fours that I've loved, and
sure.
all other sports.
Well, and it's funny because this might be a difference in perspective here, but again, because I see that game put on a lot of lists, a lot of short lists for greatest Super Bowl of all time. And it's funny because my buddies and I that watch our Super Bowls together, we always kind of chuckle on that one. Like, really? The game that was 9-0 at halftime and we were feeling kind of drowsy watching the first half? Like, to a couple of us, that game sort of coasts on the reputation of, yes, a great second half, a great fourth quarter, and everything like that. But as opposed to, 60 minutes of enthralling action, there's a couple of us that might not see it that way. But
what would
it
be
is
yours?
I'll be honest with you. I think it was a year or two before that. Broncos Packers. That's one of those ones people sleep on.
Oh, that was great. The helicopter.
Yes.
Oh, that was great.
Yes.
That was great. That's
yes.
a great one.
Okay.
Yeah, see, I wasn't on the field for that one. So
okay.
But that was a fantastic finish. Oh,
yes.
my God. And Elway, he waited so long. I mean, I covered the one in, 89, remember, down in New Orleans,
yes.
where he just crushed. So, yeah, that's a really good call there.
Thank you. And I assure you, Lesley, as a Clevelander, I remember every one of John Elway's Super Bowls, and that is me being objective as heck to say that I thought that was maybe the greatest Super Bowl when it's Elway that's getting it. Which, by the way, another thing that we've joked about on the show here, if you go back over a period of time, I know you weren't covering this; it was on the other network, but. Really funny how it's only people from Cleveland who notice in the 1987 AFC Championship game that Rich Carlos's kick actually didn't go through the uprights. It's kind of funny how the rest of the world ignores that.
You know what you have to say?
Yeah.
I'm really good friends with Ernie mercy. And you've just had some brilliant people up there. And I hung out for a while out in L.A. with Bernie Kosar. So you have really good people from
Oh, yeah. Well, and this is something we were talking about recently as well, of everything that he was able to do at that period of time. It's kind of funny with the USFL coming back, albeit in a completely different form, but a big part of the foundation of that Browns juggernaut in the late 80s came out of that. Mike Johnson at linebacker, I believe Dan Fike, one of our great offensive tackles, and on and on and on. Ernie did a very good job of raiding the bones of the USFL when it came apart.
Yeah, and he was brilliant when he was with Baltimore with Unitas, and then he was with the Giants in their winning years. So, yeah, I always think it's a privilege. I always, in my life, I've learned the most from people like Ernie or coaches. I learned a lot from Bill Walsh, obviously from John Madden, from Parcells, from Rick Pitino, from Mike Krzyzewski, from Rick Majerus. So I really felt to me like I was given the gift of the education of all of these people.
Well, yes, you've worked with some amazing, amazing people. And as I said, I wanted to get to the John Madden part because, again, of course, you being one of the speakers at his memorial service. And I really enjoyed everything that you had to say because it was one of these things where, again, memorial services are a sad occasion by definition. That's why you're there. But everything that you had to say, to those of us who didn't know John Madden personally, it felt like it was certainly in his spirit because John Madden was somebody that always made you laugh. He always entertained the viewers and everything like that. And it was the perfect kind of lighthearted, I thought, summation, some of the great stories. And again, I feel like, just in my personal opinion, if you had a growing the game Mount Rushmore, I think it would be Ed Sable, Steve Sable, John Madden, Pete Rozelle. I think those four probably did the most to help take football from, again, at the start of your career, it was still behind baseball in this country, but somewhere probably in the 80s, it really, kind of passed it by. And I feel like those four had an awful lot to do with that.
That's really good. No, I think you might just have to pick one Sable, even though, both were Giants.
Sure.
But it was, what happened with the NFL was that it is a television sport, and that's what Pete Rozelle understood. And I think, look, I know everybody was down on Art Modell, but, he didn't have the money that these billionaires all have. He didn't handle it well, probably, but, I mean, he knew that, just with that stadium, he couldn't carry it. But I think the reason that football passed was, people got more impatient about baseball, and it seemed to be the same teams all the time. And in football, they set it up. It was the genius and also the genius of those early owners that Wellington Mara was willing to go in with the Packers, that it wasn't just going to be Wellington Mara in New York and Hallis in Chicago and Brown in Cleveland, that they all were going to share it. And that was really the genius of how they formed the NFL. But I think probably John Madden had more influence if you took his coaching, his broadcasting, and his game than anybody in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, that's why I would put him on that short list because, as you say, it's multifaceted and it's very amusing to me. I mean, there's a lot of millennials running around who probably know him prominently from the video game. And I think, if I read correctly, I think that was something that he would joke about in later years of being predominantly known for that by younger people. And he had this incredible body of work that had come previous to that. And again, I felt like everything you had to say at the memorial service, those were some great stories there. And just as somebody who's a friend of his, any of the aspects of his that you feel like are underappreciated, not as well known as they should be, like what would you tell somebody to give more of a full figure of what they think they know of John Madden? What would you say?
I'd say two things, and one of them is something Andy Reid said out at the Oakland Coliseum. I'd say two things. One, I would say he was such a brilliant businessman that people didn't get at all. He was buying real estate in Arizona when he was a coach. He became a billionaire off the Madden game, which he designed entirely with a guy named Trip Hawkins, who got out of Harvard and he came to John. It was back when Pong, if anybody remembers Pong, was that game in a bar, but you could only see, like, Trip had only 7 people on each side. And John said, no, I'm not going to do it unless we figure out a way to really represent the game. And they worked a long time at it. And he was a genius businessman, but yet also, and he lived at the Dakota, where John Lennon lived in New York. I mean, he was really a savvy businessman, but he also, and this was captured by Andy Reid. Andy Reid said that what he learned from John Madden was never lose your childish love of life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can see that. I can see that in him, because that's the one thing, and as somebody who didn't know John Madden, but from afar, I think that's one of the things that he seemed to sort of consistently ooze in many different ways here, was a love of life. That's, for somebody to have said that to him, yeah, I can see that, because I think to most people who loved him from afar, didn't know him, that would come as no surprise at all. That's a great, confirmation of that from you.
Yeah, he would stop. I mean, we'd be going through Utah on our way to a 49er game, and he'd see a Little League game or something. We'd just stop. Or he'd see like a carnival. I remember going out of El Paso once from a Cowboy game on up to, maybe we were doing a game in LA. And he would have the bus stop at a carnival. And he always was willing to be John Madden, which a lot of mega celebrities like that are not. He didn't care if you were a cab driver or a king. He had time for you.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and it was very interesting, because when you were talking about at the memorial service, among other things, your experiences of traveling with him, again, to be honest with you, that had never really occurred to me. I didn't really know if anybody else did. I knew that probably the majority of people who worked with him on broadcast were flying there and everything. So the fact that you got to do the Madden Cruiser, that's one of those things, and I'm sure this has occurred to you over a period of time, that that's one of those peak experiences in life that probably so many people wish they could have. You got to live that out. You drove across the country in the Madden Cruiser with John Madden, and that in and of itself, I mean, forget all the professional accomplishments and everything else you've done there, just as far as a thing that people would give their left arm to do, that's something you got to do. I'm sure you've reflected on that.
Yeah, I guess because he was a teacher. That's what he regarded himself. I remember Rick Majerus once told me that the greatest thing anybody could ever call him was coach. Mm-hmm. And I think John Madden felt the same way. He wanted you to learn, and he wanted to know about you. And he was up for any conversation, no matter where it went. And he enjoyed it, and he took his time. He's a great observer, really like a Mark Twain. He could look out the window and just see things, and it was a whole education. Yeah, actually, all those guys. People don't know that Pat Summerall was a Russian major in college, and when he got out of school, he took. This is the late 50s when he got out of school, I guess, early 60s. No, late 50s, and he took the train from Vladivostok in Eastern Russia all the way to Moscow. I mean, these people are really interesting, and I felt like it was such a laboratory for me of learning.
Yeah, it just it almost feels like, as far as some of the characters over that period of time, it's like they don't make them like that anymore. I mean, you look at some of the other people that were at CBS Sports there, you may not have overlapped very long on the timeline with Jimmy the Greek, but him being there, just all these characters just from a different age that are just so utterly fascinating, and to try and explain them to people of today, it's really kind of tough to put it into words with a lot of these guys.
Well, they're still pretty, Tony Romo's really interesting, and Jim Nance is for all time. So
that's true.
Yeah, I don't know that. It's just that I was privileged because I've had a 45-year career that I kind of got to drop in on a lot of sports and a lot of athletes and meet people from different parts of the world, and I just feel like I don't have $1 billion, but I've had $1 billion life. Absolutely,
yes, and point well taken. And I do tend to kind of wax about the good old days on that, but as you point out truthfully there, yet again, I think that there's definitely some very interesting folks on the landscape today, and just because they're not cut from the same cloth as Jimmy the Greek, it doesn't mean they're not interesting in their own right. So yes, point well taken. And again, I know that from the experiences that you've had over a period of time and building up the record that you did, I know that is something where at this point in time here, taking things into your own hands with podcasting and diving into that, I know that's something where it's allowed you to pursue your love of having these conversations, much like the one that we're having here, being able to dive into the nitty gritty with folks. So talk about that and what that experience has been like for you to be able to get into these conversations with people in this form.
Oh, thanks for asking. CEO, the head of content at SiriusXM, had offered me a job a couple years ago. And I said, no, I really don't know if that fits right now. And then the pandemic came, and I did like 60 other people's podcasts. I mean, I was doing Huddle Up with Gus Barat. So, I was doing everybody's. And so then when Scott Greenstein called me again and I said, yes, I'd love to do it because I do love to have conversations with people. And so I've tried to really diversify it. I've tried to, I think it's Robert Parrish this week, and I covered all those Lakers-Celtic games, but I had never asked Robert if, of course, he was known as the Chief, and Jack Nicholson, of course, would sit in the front row at all the games back at the Forum and at Boston Garden, and I never knew if they talked about the Chief. So Robert Parrish talked about that, how he and Jack Nicholson got to talk about the Chief from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and then Robert Parrish. So I've really just I've just picked people that I want to talk to that I think would be interesting. So, yeah, it's really been all kinds of people. David Duchovny wrote a book called Bucky Effing Dent, and I thought, oh my gosh, he must be a Red Sox fan. But it wasn't. He was a Yankee fan, and the character in there thought that Fenway was a Little League park. So here I am. I'm fighting with David Duchovny like 5 minutes into the podcast.
That's probably got to be heard to be believed. And, again, as you say, touching back on, some of the golden years of the NBA that you were covering there at CBS. And if I remember correctly, I believe I read this about you. Was it true that your favorite player growing up was Sam Jones?
Yes, we just lost him. I used to, on Halloween, everybody would dress up as Mary Poppins, and I would go as number 24. I'd write it on a white T-shirt, magic marker, and I learned a bank shot. And I got to know Sam really, really well, probably for the last 25 years. And I'd see Sam usually at least once a year, and he would always say to me, Lesley, really, you're in your 60s, you cannot dress up on Halloween, in your Sam Jones, which now he's given me some of his game jerseys. And nice. I don't care, Sam, you were my idol, and that's that.
Yeah.
So, major loss, a lot of Celtics, we lost Havlicek, lost KC, lost, Russell's about the only guy still hanging in, the greatest of them all.
Yes, and somebody that my hometown and your hometown share, Bill Fitch just passed away recently, the great coach.
Yes, and he was, I was not really close to him. Well, enough that when Dick and I got married, Red Auerbach and Bill Fitch and Bill Russell came to our wedding. I'm remarried since then, but it was kind of hilarious, that everybody at the wedding, they didn't care that Lesley Visser and Dick Stockton were getting married. They were like, oh my God, is that Bill Russell at the Shrimp Bowl?
Oh, that's incredible being able to have them there. And yes, and Mr. Stockton, a broadcast legend in his own right, to be sure. That's got to be incredible to have had them there. Well, I will tell you this, Lesley, and I'll work this out with you off air, but myself and two of my colleagues on the program here, with this being the 75th anniversary of the league, just putting out our little book here, the top 75 players in pro basketball history. We'll have that sent along to you. Sam Jones is in there, spoiler alert, so you'll get to read about him and Hondo and a lot of these other guys here. So
wait a minute, did you do the official one?
We didn't do the official one. This is the unofficial one, Lesley. Nobody nobody censors our list. Yes. This is, FDH Publishing.
And Bird better be in your top 25, too.
He is prominently in there. Bill Russell is prominently in there. Boston factors in, obviously, disproportionately, as you would expect. And, there is, so we'll, I'll work that out with you, but, whatever office you're using here these days, we'll send it out to you, to thank you. Because, again, it's such a pleasure to have you in for a conversation like this, and I'm very, very appreciative of it, and would look forward to chewing the fat with you subsequently.
Thank you. I'd love it. I had a great time. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Lesley. Really appreciate it. The legendary Lesley Visser, everybody. Thank you, and thank you, everybody, for joining us for FDH Lounge Mini Episode 1448.